Hey folks, this clip is brought to you by the fastest growing sportsbook in Tennessee, ZenSports. And code A to Z TN, ATOZ TN to earn a welcome bonus that gives you 5% cash back on your total betting volume for your first 15 days of betting. That is ZenSports. All right. So the coaching. There were some points here made in the comments. Let's see. Where'd it go? Billy Bob right here. He says, play calling has to change, not being so predictable. Oh, and this is nice. Antoine says, we're speaking truth. Thank you. I like to think so. But Billy Bob, play calling has to change to not be so predictable. Jared says that he agrees that it's been predictable. I think there's been some points made that maybe Heupel is not an amazing motivator, kind of to your point there, where they just look flat on the road. That's the speculation, of course. The play calling, you can see right in front of your eyes and kind of criticize that. But in terms of him being a motivator, you don't really know exactly what goes on behind closed doors. But we can start there before we get into whether you need to hire or fire anybody in this offseason. But I can't agree with that more. Heupel's play calling this year, and this could have come from a multitude of places, but the play calling's predictable. And last year with Hooker, you just saw them bring in these folds and do some different things and do this and do that. And there was just absolutely none of that with Joe. Was it because they didn't trust Joe at all? Maybe. Was it because they didn't trust these wide receivers at all? Maybe. Maybe was it because that offensive line, they weren't exactly earth movers? Maybe. I think it could be a combination of all of that together, but it was milquetoast, and it just got eaten up at some points by some of these teams. Obviously, you look at that Missouri and Georgia, those two games back to back, and just nothing going, and there were no adjustments, and there was nothing. They just were kind of trying to fit, square peg in a round hole, or however you want to say that, and it's tough to watch. And I think there's an element in there of Heupel runs the system. It's Heupel's system. He's going to run it until the wheels fall off. And I said this last week. You run until the wheels fall off. Well, the wheels fell off at points in this season. So change it. Do something different. Do something. Because it just can't be that if it's not working. Now, hopefully Nico makes that better. Hopefully the talent coming in makes that easier on Heupel too. But that is something where I will point out and go like, we got to do something here. We got to do something.
Yeah, I think it's a really complex conversation because, as we know, Josh Heupel's offense, it's pretty unique. There's not this catalog of plays that you might see in a more traditional offense. So much of it is on the quarterback and the receivers on the field, what they see, making the right moves, a lot of choice routes. And these choice routes, it's kind of become like a dirty word when it comes to play calling and getting players ready for the NFL, but they're being ran in the NFL every Sunday. Yep. We saw the Buffalo Bills screw one up yesterday in overtime that would have won the game against the Eagles. Ironically, it was a former Josh Heupel player that was in the end zone running the choice route, Gabe Davis from UCF, and he went one way and Josh Allen went the other way with the ball. They weren't on the same page. Incompletion. When you had that chemistry like you had with Hendon Hooker and Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt last season, those are touchdowns. And that makes play calling look a lot different because all of a sudden you're hitting on these plays that you were missing on this season. So I think, yeah, a lot of it starts with the quarterback and then the trust that Heupel has, not just in the quarterback, but your receivers too, to make the right choice. And it didn't seem like he wasn't putting them in the situation to make the right decisions a lot of times. You saw a lot of these screen passes, these perimeter screens where, as Heupel says over and over and over, it's just an extension of the run game. It's getting the ball out there because you're spread out so wide. You know that you've got a blocker and you've only got to beat one guy. So there's a good chance you're going to pick up 4, 5, 6 yards. That was the goal on most of those plays. Sometimes, Squirrel or Brew, before he got hurt, might break one or break a tackle and get a first down, 15 yards, whatever the case may be. But I think you saw this really simplified offense because of the personnel. Like, I don't think, from last season or 2022, it was a much different looking offense at times. It was much more dynamic. Every week it seemed like they were adding little things. You just didn't see that this season. Well, Heupel didn't quit being that guy. And I know there's the narrative about maybe Alex Golesh had a big impact on that. And yeah, I think Alex Golesh probably did have a big impact on it. I think Alex Golesh is a really smart guy, did a really good job at USF this year.
Yeah.
He's very confident in the box. There's no really hesitation with him. I think him and Heupel were in lockstep with each other, where kind of allowed Heupel to be a little more of a CEO type guy. His hand was still in the offense there. So I do think losing him was a big loss. I don't know if it was the entire reason that the offense looked the way it did this season, though. I think it was just a combination of things. I mean, these guys, Jeff Lebby, that just took over at Mississippi State, that kind of comes from the same offense, has worked under Heupel before. When Oklahoma's offense wasn't, clicking this season, you heard the same criticisms out there. There were games where it's Lebby's running the same 5 or 6 plays the entire game. What's he doing? Where's the creativity? These guys don't just forget how to be good play callers. Again, I think it's just there's so much on the quarterback and the players on the field. To run that fast, there has to be. It's the only way that system works. You can't call in a play and just necessarily execute it that quickly. It's dependent on what the defense is given. And the defenses did play Tennessee a little different this season, though Heupel kind of said, hey, they've seen that in the past. That's nothing to panic about. There were times they exploited it, plenty of times. I mean, how many missed deep throws did we see, or miss drops down the field that if 75% of those plays are made, the conversation about the offense sounds a lot different this offseason, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right on all those points. It's it's kind of a cop out answer maybe, but it just is what it is as far as that goes. And so hopefully with getting guys back from injury, with getting exciting young players in here with Nico and all those things, that can improve. I mean, the prospect of having the number one quarterback in America with what looks like the kind of talent that Nico has for 3 years. Oh, it's football season, and it's time to switch to ZenSports, the fastest growing sports book in Tennessee, changing the bonus game with their cash rewards program. When you sign up for ZenSports with code A2ZTN, ATOZTN, earn a welcome bonus that gives you 5% cash back on your total betting volume for your first 15 days of betting. And if you have friends who bet on sports, share your ZenSports referral bonus code with them, and you will earn 3% of their betting volume for their first 6 months of betting on ZenSports with no cap on how much you can earn. So what are you waiting for? Stop wasting time and money on other sportsbooks when you could be earning real cash rewards with ZenSports. Download today on the App Store at zensports.com. And your wallet will thank you later. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older in Tennessee to bet. That is ZenSports. Go download it now. I mean, that'll send shivers down your spine thinking about that. That's really, really exciting. And hopefully the talent around him comes with it. If you can get really good offensive linemen, you can get guys like Mike Matthews, the wide receiver spot, and I think it could open that up. But I just also Heupel in some certain spots, shotgun in short yardage. Please shoot me in the face. No more.
There were some there were definitely some situational things, and he kind of mentioned it at times. I mean, you heard him at the end of that A&M game. Kind of, a candid moment there where he said, hey, I almost effed that up, a couple of times in that game. And I appreciate the candidness from him, because a lot of coaches are not comfortable enough in their own skin to be like, hey, I'm not going to be perfect all the time. We see it at all levels of football, from college to the NFL. Some of the situational stuff it's a lot easier when you're watching on TV from your couch than it is in the moment on the sideline with all the pressure going on to make those decisions. Some of those fourth down calls, some of them you got to punt. Some of them you got to call a better play, kind of read the situation. That stuff he does need to improve on for sure moving forward. But I think offensively, as far as staff changes, continuity is so important to him. The only thing, if somebody leaves for another job, I know Jerry Mack, the running backs coach, was mentioned today that Middle Tennessee might have some interest in him for their head coaching job. He's from Memphis. That might be a job that interests him. I don't know where his head's at. He's been a head coach before, North Carolina Central, before he's an offensive coordinator at Rice. So if he leaves, you got to go find a running backs coach. But I think Heupel would probably find somebody from his tree of coaches. It wouldn't be some random hire, completely new voice. Though I think he should kind of go into some of that because that's how he found Alex Golesh, right? Like Golesh wasn't a guy that came up with Heupel. He's a guy that he went and got from Iowa State that maybe brought some fresh ideas. I do think you can get stagnant if you're just hearing the same voices all the time. Continuity is important, yes, but you got to hear some new ideas from time to time. But I think defensively, that's where you might, could see some staff changes. I think Willie Martinez, I don't think he was under contract beyond this season. So that's kind of where that conversation probably starts. I don't think there's going to be a defensive coordinator change. That would be surprising. The defense gave up the same amount of points per game as they did last season. So I don't think anything drastic is going to happen there.
Timothy says, is Martinez terrible, or we just not have any players in the secondary? Yes, that is the answer to that question. I don't know. I don't know. Martinez is terrible, but when you look side by side at how much that defensive line has progressed compared to what these defensive backs look like, and they're both, I mean, the defensive line is playing young guys, and the defensive backs, at least for a big chunk of the season, was all like super senior guys. You could make some arguments like, oh, just the players that Martinez has just simply aren't good. But I would just argue they don't look well coached, and it would not surprise me if he gets axed. I don't think Tim Banks will get axed because, as you said, actually the defense got better from last season to this season.
Well,
and so, it's marginal, and you didn't have the offense to back it up in a whole set of games this year, but it actually did. It did get better. And I think you have some exciting players coming in. You have some exciting guys that are already here that are young coming up, and you got to just roll with what you have there. And maybe Banks leaves for something else. And I think you look at like a Derek Mason or something like that. He called one of Tennessee's games earlier this year, and it sounded like he was begging to be Tennessee's defensive coordinator, probably because he didn't love what he was seeing from Tim Banks. But I also, that said, I don't think Tim Banks will be fired. But also, I agree with you that at a certain point, you got to stop defensively calling games the way that he does and giving these opposing teams these long, drawn-out drives just because you don't want them to hit you over the top. And yeah, the way that he calls games, just bull rushing a bunch in a game. Well, he does that against lesser opponents, and it works. It works really great sometimes. It worked against Vandy. The Vandy, you injured their quarterback because you hit him so much. But against good teams like Georgia and Missouri this year, they run all over you, and it ruins to your point there with the Butchism. It is not complimentary football, and it kind of drives your offense into the ground. And it's nightmare on top of nightmare when your offense is also not working. And you're not giving yourself chances to get back on the field. It is weirdly, it is almost better to have the other team score and give yourself chances. You don't want to say let them score, but in some sense, maybe do. And it's just different philosophies as far as how to call a defensive game. But maybe there could be something there. Just reevaluations that could be done with Heupel's offense, with this defense, and then maybe there has to be, kind of a sacrificial lamb there in Willie Martinez or something like that, just to show people that you're moving up. But I honestly, I kind of, as far as that goes, with Heupel's time so far, he has been very loyal. And I would almost go, I'll believe it when I see it in terms of somebody actually getting fired. I don't know. I could see that not happening all at the same time as much as I could see it happening. So we'll see.
Yeah, sometimes people getting fired, it's more stuff behind the scenes that you don't see. It's how do they get along with people. Good players make good defensive coordinators, right? I mean, ultimately, the guys with the best talent are the best defensive coordinators in college football, typically. So, get more talent. Maybe Tim Banks looks better. Really, with defensive coordinator, unless there's just a guy like I thought maybe a Dave Aranda would fit in well with Heupel's culture, but it looks like he's sticking around at Baylor for another season, so he won't be available. We've been through this before. When you change defensive coordinators, sometimes going from John Jancic to Bob Shoop, 2015 to 2016 was a disaster. It didn't work out. It wasn't a good fit. Sometimes you bring in these new defensive coordinators in a year where you think the offense is going to be pretty good, like in 2012 with Sal Sunseri. It just doesn't work out. And you try to move to this new system. Everybody's trying to learn it. All the continuity's gone because if for it to work, especially somebody like Heupel, who's an offensive-minded coach, if you bring in a new defensive coordinator, kind of got to let them be the head coach of the defense, which means bringing in your own guys to some extent. You don't want to lose Rodney Gardner. Mike Eckler has turned out, the punt return, Tennessee had like 40 yards. They allowed like 40 yards in punt returns this season or something absurdly low. Like they hardly ever allowed a return. The outside linebackers that he coached played pretty well. James Pierce was getting off the edge. I think his energy is probably a guy you want to keep around. I don't know, much about what the linebackers coach, Brian G. Mary, what that kind of relationship's like or the impact he's having on the middle linebackers. Kind of got to give him a pass these last couple of years because he had Jeremy Banks, who fast, but not really an SEC linebacker. Keenan Peely goes down this season, which is going to make you look really good. You got to go into that depth. Elisha Herring doesn't really look like an SEC linebacker, so kind of give him a pass. Really, Martinez is the only guy that you can kind of point to with the cornerback play that you could say, hey, let's maybe make a change here. Otherwise, I don't think you want to go whole staff overhaul, especially going into a year where you hope to really compete for a playoff spot, with the 12 team, expanding to 12 teams next year.
Yes.